Sí, hola, buenas tardes a todo el
Good
mundo.
afternoon, everybody.
Bon après-midi, tout le monde.
Afternoon, everybody.
Para mí un placer
To me, it's a great pleasure to start
esta colaboración entre
this cooperation between the La Caixa Foundation, the Club of Rome, and specifically the office of the Club of Rome in Barcelona and the European Institute for the Mediterranean, and to thank for the good working conditions with these three institutions, because we have actually committed ourselves to working long term. And we will have as a start today's cycle, and it will have as a vertebrating axis the 2030 agenda, and secondly, the Mediterranean perspective, which, as I've said beforehand, wants to continue not only in this cycle but also beyond.
Desde el Instituto Europeo del
At
Mediterráneo,
the European Institute for the Mediterranean, which is a think tank specializing in Euro-Mediterranean relationships,
lo que
is
es
highly committed with the development
riberas del
of cooperation between both sides of the Mediterranean. We believe that the implementation of these sustainable development goals is a unique opportunity. First, to face the common challenges we share both in Europe and in the Mediterranean, both south and east. Not only environmental challenges, as will be discussed in this first cycle, but also with regards to the other goals foreseen in the agenda. The 2030 agenda gives us a cooperation framework, a very relevant cooperation framework, which places us all on the same footing. And for the first time, we define goals that must be attained both by the north and by the south. So from that point of view, the fact that we have commitments on both sides of the Mediterranean, what it allows us to do is to speak the same language, and therefore to favor cooperation. Bearing in mind that there is a certain delay in the implementation of the 2030 agenda in the Mediterranean, it is necessary to promote this sort of discussions, not only to raise awareness about the need to have this instrument, but also in order to promote their development. So, in order to start this debate, today we have Jaume Lanaspa, who is the chairman of the Barcelona office of the Club of Rome. Jaume, you have the floor, sir. Fine, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon, everybody. I am delighted to participate in this so-called ceremony to open this cycle, which has been organized jointly by the European Mediterranean Institute, the Club of Rome, the La Caixa Foundation, and the special presence of Sandrine Dixon de Clercq, co-president of the Club of Rome. And I'd like to also thank all of the participants, both the moderator, the guest speaker, and the discussant. Today's approach, as we all know, will be a joint approach to the 2030 agenda. Because if we do not do that, we will not save our Mediterranean. And this is very relevant in the sense that I personally will not see the disaster personally, but it is very important for my children and for my grandchildren. So we have to be fully committed to working jointly on an equal footing, as Josep Ferrer has said. Another clear point is that, in my opinion, most Mediterranean citizens share different things. First of all, we share a feeling of belonging. For many Mediterranean people, a Mediterranean identity is an fundamental trait of our identity. Secondly, we share a very rich history that has not always been an easy one or peaceful. And in the past, we only have to think about the fact that our Mediterranean basin right now is witnessing warfare between Israel and Palestine. And that's a tragedy. So this is what actually defines our Mediterranean. We also share a wish for peace and progress. We Mediterranean people, in spite of it all, we are peaceful people, in spite of what we're witnessing now. And we also share, and I'm going to focus now on the most important point, we share a common destiny. We are fully convinced about this common destiny, and that probably was not true a few years ago. But right now, my personal feeling is that this common destiny feeling is growing fast. And we're well aware that our common destiny on both sides of the Mediterranean will be conditioned by the climate change effects, especially hard on our Mediterranean in terms of equitability, sustainability, and even survival possibility. That's why I congratulate you for having organized a discussion like the one we will have today. So allow me to greet all of the people who are following us remotely, and specifically and very affectionately my co-president of the Club of Rome, Sandrine Dixon de Clèves. If you'll allow me, and let me just introduce a little bit of an ad. The Club of Rome has a number of peculiarities. First, a governance model that's based on two co-presidencies. We always share the presidency. Secondly, the president is, has been in the hands of two women in two different continents. So the Club of Rome has a special sensitivity in regards to the main challenges faced by humanity. Thank you. Well, thank you, Jaume.
We have the honor to count to in these welcoming remarks count with the participation of Ms. Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, co-president of the Club of Rome. Sandrine, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for having invited me, and also to the beautiful words that have just been indicated by Mr. Lanaspin and also yourself in terms of your opening remarks. This conference and exchange comes at an absolutely crucial time. And you are right that the Club of Rome has decided to very much split its presidency between two women. One woman in Europe, the other in Africa, two continents that are very much seeing the impact, but also the need to work together as faced with this planetary emergency. The Mediterranean region is in between those two continents, is part actually to a certain degree of those continents. And the Mediterranean region is also a region, as was exactly indicated before, that teaches us very clearly the importance of the impact of desertification, the impact of climate change already in migration. We can see right now what's happening in Spain in terms of migrants who just came over from Morocco. We know that we will have an increase of climate migration coming from the Mediterranean region all the way through Europe. But we also know that, as was indicated before, that if we don't work together now as we face this planetary emergency, we will not emerge. This is not only the 2030 agenda, this is what we call the decade of action. This decade of action, which very much calls us to work on key sectors so that we can shift the impact and the mitigation potential on climate change, so that we can start to divest And we've just seen as well that Spain has done a very great declaration today, actually. And Teresa Ribeiro, your Minister of Environment, was just interviewed, and a good friend, on her work in trying to shift Spain, part of a very important shift in the Mediterranean region, towards a low carbon economy, to shift out of fossil energy. This is part of the conversation that we have to have in the region, because our dependency also on fossil energy is very much interlinked. But then there is also the impacts on our oceans, the impacts on our land. In terms of our oceans, so many negotiations with regard to fisheries, overfishing, the way in which we can protect our oceans, but the same in terms of the way in which we use our land, the way in which we can shift to regenerative agriculture, the way in which we can ensure that we have proper carbon stocks in our agricultural regions. So the beauty of this initiative is that we work together as European Mediterranean citizens and governments, but also the Mediterranean governments, on addressing the key issues of climate change. But also, let's remember, the key issues that often are also linked to geopolitics. We cannot disentangle the Syrian war from the conflict over water. We may not be able to disentangle some of the tensions geopolitically between Europe and the Mediterranean region unless we look at migration and the impact of climate change on migrants. So all of these deep questions are absolutely fundamental. And the more we can try to work together to unpack the tensions, to speak about solutions, to speak about knowledge exchange, and to ensure that we work together so that we actually help the Mediterranean region join Europe on the journey to what we call a European Green and Social Deal, the better we will be. I would like to maybe close with a few thoughts. It is fundamental as we come and we approach all of the major negotiations. We have before us the G7. I just spoke to the Italian presidency on the G20 and the declarations that finance ministers will be making around potentially debt for nature swaps, the way in which they can help in terms of sovereign debt across the rest of the world and bring more countries on this journey. But also what we call the CBD COP, the Biodiversity COP, and also very much COP26, which will be focusing on climate change. So we need to ensure that when we have our discussions, when we understand where we can find solutions in the Mediterranean region, we also convince our governments, as they are facing these very important negotiations, of what the key solutions are, and make firm declarations so that we can truly emerge from emergency. We published our planetary emergency plan 3 years ago, revised it now facing COVID, and we are convinced that by de-risking our economies through a decarbonized economy, through a regenerative economy, we will actually be able to bring greater well-being across the globe and across different regions. Let's use this as a case study in the Mediterranean region to see how we can better collaborate together to enhance greater well-being in the Mediterranean region as we move into this decade of action. So I'm very pleased to be here. It's a very important event, and I look forward to building with you so that we turn this event into action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandrine, to these wise remarks, very interesting. Now we will start with the dialogue itself that will be moderated by Arnau Coral, Director of the Advisory Council for Sustainable Development of Catalonia. So Arnau, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jeff. I would like to start by thanking EMED, the Barcelona office of the Club of Rome, and the Caixa Foundation for the kind invitation to moderate this dialogue, the dialogue climate and environmental change in the Mediterranean. This dialogue aims, as you know, at setting the scene of the conference cycle by presenting the state-of-the-art situation of climate and environmental change in the Mediterranean basin. Climate change, and I think that everyone knows, is one of the most serious systemic challenges affecting the Mediterranean basin. Actually, I would like to remind you that in its fifth assessment report, the IPCC already considered our region as highly vulnerable to climate change. Specifically, the IPCC report pointed out that the Mediterranean would suffer multiple stresses and systemic failures due to climate change. The first Mediterranean assessment report, also known as MARO-1 on climate, and the first Mediterranean assessment report on climate and environmental change, MARO-1, prepared by the MEDEC, or I would say our independent network of Mediterranean experts on climate and environmental change. And the region is working faster than the global average. Sea level rise may exceed 20 to 110 centimeters by the end of the century, while annual precipitation rates will considerably decrease. MARO-1 also points out that climate change-related phenomena, together with other human-induced drivers of environmental degradation of Mediterranean ecosystems, pose significant challenges for marine and terrestrial ecosystems, but also the human well-being in both shores of the Mediterranean, especially as regards water and food security. I would like to highlight the MEDEC report, in which I had the opportunity to participate as an author, and together with Arnaud Grabs and some other colleagues as a member of the MEDEC steering committee. Climate change policies need to be based on sound scientific knowledge and data, coupled with awareness raising and technical capacities to ensure informed decision-making at all levels, recognizing and protecting the climate adaptation and mitigation services of natural ecosystems. Actually, this is a main message from the Mediterranean Strategy for Sustainable Development 2016-2025, which recognizes that scientific knowledge and tools on climate change are not sufficiently accessible and used for decision-making. The MEDEC, created in July 2015, aims in order to update and consolidate the best scientific knowledge about climate and environmental changes in the Mediterranean basin and render it accessible to policymakers, key stakeholders, and the public in order to facilitate ownership of scientific knowledge by them. Dr. Seema Sharif and Arnaud Grabs, our speakers this afternoon, will further develop on the climate and environmental change in the Mediterranean. I suppose that they will mention some of the contents of the MEDEC report, but I would like to highlight that they represent, or they play, two roles that we have in the MEDEC. The one from the scientific community, and the other from this kind of these people working on creating the atmosphere or the conditions for a successful transmission of scientific knowledge to policymakers. So I think that we have two very important speakers this afternoon, and I am sure that they will give us some clear messages and some some messages, and especially some recommendations for action. So let me introduce the two speakers. First of all, we have, as I have already mentioned, Seema Sharif. She's a full professor in the Department of Environment at the Institut Supérieur de Sciences Appliquées de Tunis. She presently does research in atmospheric science, climate change and water science using analytical chemistry, biological chemistry, statistics, modeling, and artificial intelligence. She's a member of MEDEC. She received the Scientific Research Prize for the Environmental Technologies of the President of the Republic in Tunis Republic in 2009, and the prestigious Mackey Medal for Water Protection, Restoration, or on Sustainable Use of the Water Environmental Protection in 2013. And Arnaud Grabs is the Senior Climate Advisor in the Energy and Climate Action Unit at the Union for the Mediterranean. He holds a degree in environment and public works engineering from the École Nationale des Travaux Publics de l'État in France. He has an extended experience in several climate policies. Between 2012 and 2017, he was head of unit at the French National Center, CEREMA. He also was deputy chief at the Regional Economic Service of the French Embassy in Moscow, etc. So he has a very vast, long experience, and I'm sure that both of them will give a crucial overview or crucial vision of what's going on the Mediterranean in terms of climate change. So, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, I don't know if it is okay. You can see the slides?
Yes, we can.
It's a full screen? Is it a full screen or not?
No, it's not. You need to put it on full screen.
Yeah, it's almost full screen.
Okay. I don't know how to do.
I think it's on the right-hand side. There
Yeah,
you go.
Because sometimes it works, sometimes not.
I think it's it's in the right side, perhaps the third. You know that there is a.
I will do it another time. Sorry.
Don't worry.
Take your time.
Okay, I think it's okay now.
Yes.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. So, bonjour. Assalamu alaikum. In le pozdrav. So, first of all, I have to thank everybody that invited me. So, the European Institute of Mediterranean, the Club of Rome, La Caixa Foundation, to this Med Dialogue. And I will talk today about the state of art of the climate and environmental change in the Mediterranean. Of course, I cannot talk about all the problems and the issues of environmental change because there are thousands. So I choose to speak about the specificity of the Mediterranean and especially the main issues. So what are the main Mediterranean specificities? First of all, it is a hotspot, a world hotspot for biodiversity. We have 15,000 to 25,000 flora species, and among them 60% are endemic. 1/3 of the fauna also is endemic. It is also a hotspot, a world hotspot for climate change, as the temperature in the Mediterranean increased more than in the other region of the globe, and we'll see it later. Unfortunately, it is also a world hotspot for sea plastic pollution. In fact, in the world, in the sea, we have many plastics, and we have especially these plastic gyres. Perhaps you have heard of it. It's a kind of continents full of plastic. So much plastic in the sea that it makes continents, and there are 5 in in all the oceans. And in these plastic gyres, there are one item of plastics per cubic meter. In Mediterranean, we have exactly the same concentration of plastic that in this continents of plastic in the world. So it is really a big threat, this plastic pollution in the sea. The last point, but not the least, it's that Mediterranean is well known for its water scarcity, as it is the world's most water scarce region, especially the south of the Mediterranean. So let's talk first about the climate change and see what has already happened in our short history of warming. If you look at this curve, the blue one is for the Mediterranean and the green one is for the whole globe. We can see that there is a rise in temperature through the years, just beginning from the industrial area. So after the industrial area, the temperature of the air has risen really increased very much. But this phenomena is seen all around the globe, but it is especially in the Mediterranean after the 1980s, we see that there is a much higher increase for the Mediterranean by 20%. So the warming in our region is much higher than the warming in the whole globe. So now we have seen the history, and now let's try to do some predictions. So if we see on the left, we have the history, the black line. On the right, the rose and the blue lines are the predictions of the temperature highing in the future. So we have two kinds of predictions. A prediction with a low scenario and a high scenario. The lowest scenario predicts 1.5 degrees increase in temperature, and the highest scenario shows about a 5 increase in temperature. What is the low and the high scenario here? It's the low greenhouse gas concentration scenario and the high greenhouse gas concentration scenario. What is the green gas in this here? So the greenhouse gas are the gases that are responsible of the climate change. So if we are lowering our consumption, in fact, essentially our combustions and the traffic and industry and using all this fuel and coal, etc. So the combustion of fossil fuels, we have, if we lower it, we will have the low greenhouse gas concentration scenario, so the blue line. If we will continue what we call the business as usual, so what we are already doing, it will be the high greenhouse gas concentration scenario, and we will have a 5 degrees increase in the temperature. That is very, very much. So this climate change and environmental change is touching the essentials for human life. Sometimes we forget about them, but what are they? It is the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, and the home we are living in. So if first we will talk about the coastal area. If we are looking to the medium scenario, but the medium scenario is the scenario where we will lower our emissions of greenhouse gases, but not completely. So in this case, we will have in 2050 a 1 meter increase in sea level, in the sea level. So all the coastal region of the Mediterranean will be submerged by the water if they have an altitude of less than 1 meter. So all the region, all the coastal area will be touched of this sea level rise, but some of them will be soon submerged. Here we have some examples of Italy in 2050, so in 30 years from now. We will see that all the region around Venice will be submerged. Also in Libya, the Misrata southern region, in Egypt, Alexandria and Port Said, and many small islands that are low in altitude, like the Kerkena Island in Tunisia, that more than the half will be submerged. It is very important here to note that this is only a freeze frame. It is an instant picture of 2050, but this phenomena is going to continue. So it is not just like this region will be touched, because it will continue, and the even region that will be higher will be touched and will be submerged. Of course, if you don't stop polluting with greenhouse gases. Now we go to water resources. So if we look at this figure of the whole world, the regions in blue are the regions that are very lucky and have much water. And the region in red, and the more it is red, dark red, and the more there is an absolute scarcity, are concentrated in the southern Mediterranean. So it is very clear that it is a very, very vulnerable and very scarce region already. Did you see this map is from the FAO from 2013. What are the water we are talking about? We are talking about the water resources that are conventional. And what are the conventional water we use to drink, irrigate, industrial, etc.? It is surface water and underground water. What is surface water? Surface water is the water from rivers, from wadi, and from lakes, for example. So here I choose an example of the Kaseb Dam in Tunisia, that is a very big dam in the northern part of the country, and do some projection of what will happen due to what is already happening and what can happen with this evaporation, with this climate change. So the orange and red part on the right are the scenarios if the evaporation is 0 or 3%, so the old evaporation before 2008. That what is not the case. In fact, the evaporation now between 2008 and 2030 was 6%. And with this evaporation that is already going, we will have a depletion, a total depletion of water in this specific dam before the end of the century. And if we have an increase in temperature, so an increase in evaporation, the depletion can even be earlier. This is only an example, because we have to see it to feel it and understand it. This evaporation is occurring in all the water surface in all the world, and especially in Mediterranean, as we see that we have a higher increase in temperature. So here we can prove that we are going to have a depletion of surface water. What's the point with underground water? Here we have two pictures. One on the left, it is the sea level, normal sea level. And on the left, we have the well that is pumping fresh water. Fresh water is blue light on the left. And salt water that is underground is on the under the sea and goes under the earth. So the well is pumping fresh water, but if the sea level will rise, the sea water that is underground will go more underground in the land and the well that was pumping fresh groundwater will now pump salty groundwater. So this phenomena was already been seen when we have overpumping from the well, but with sea level rise, it will be accelerated and increased. So for underground water, we already have the problem of very high pollution with biologic and chemical contaminants. We have already a depletion of aquifers because of the overpumping. Of course, if the temperature rises, evaporation rises, we need to irrigate more. And we have to remember that in the Mediterranean, 70 to 80% of the water is used for agriculture. So the overpumping is not a local phenomena and or a minor phenomena. It has to be considered very seriously, and it has already led to depletion of many wells, and with sea level rise, the coastal wells will be even salinized. So now we have talked about the quantity, so depletion of surface water and underground water, and the quality. But the quality of water is in a big threat also. So we have chemical contamination by pesticides, heavy metals, nutrient for agriculture, pH, antibiotics, endocrine disruptors of many kinds, hundreds of endocrine disruptors. Endocrine disruptors are contaminants that can change the chemical bioreaction in the body because they will act as hormones, and even at very low concentrations. We will also have physical contamination like microplastics. We already seen them in the sea, and even the fishes. In the fishes, we can have tens of microplastics, and they will go in our body, and they will carry with them other contaminants. We can have also nanomaterials that come from electronics, and even we have nanomaterials in food and in industrial products like toothpaste, etc. Nanomaterials are materials that are very small and can go to our brain, our heart, etc., and interfere with biochemical reaction in our body. Of course, we will have also biological contamination by fecal coliform viruses, protozoa, parasitic worms, etc., coming from wastes, human wastes, and essentially wastewaters. And of course, salinization that we have talked just before about. So we have done, it's not me, but the world have done a short full-scale test when they did the COVID-19 lockdown. And what we see is surface and groundwater pollution reduction, and air pollution has been reduced for NO2 essentially. NO2 comes from the combustion of fossil fuels, and it was reduced because of the restriction of surface traffic and of non-essential industries. And of course, also the noise reduction. Of course, we cannot say anything after these results because it's only for a few months, and it's difficult to put it in the scale of what has already been done for 180 years of pollution, of massive pollution. So now we will talk about the threat on food. So I like very much this example of wheat because Mediterranean region represents 60% of the world's grown area for durum wheat, and that all the country or main Mediterranean countries eat wheat daily in pasta or bread or couscous. So it is a very important food in Mediterranean, and it's just an example as we will see. So in the left picture, that is yellow, we can see that we have two wheats, and the smallest is the one that was stressed with no watering for 5 days. So only 5 days no watering leads to a decrease in the size and of the wheat. On the right side, on the right picture, we see even another phenomena due to the same water stress of 5 days. So here we have lost some grains in the wheat. So now we talk about drought, but we can talk also about temperature. So because drought and temperature are not exactly the same, because the drought is related to many parameters, the duration and the quantity of water, etc. But there is also the problem of temperature. For each degree rise, we have 7.5% of wheat yield reduction. So with the high greenhouse gas scenario expected in 2090, we already seen that we will have 5-degree rise in temperature. So with these predictions, we will have 37.5 about this percent of yield reduction in wheat. And this wheat reduction is also in addition to water deficiency that will be that reduced to 35 to 75% of the grain of the wheat. Another phenomena is that when we reach 30 degrees during the floret of the wheat, we completely lose the wheat. It's completely we reach complete sterility, so we will not have any wheat at all. Of course, nowadays it's not the case, because 30 degrees it's only reached in May, and the floret is about March, April. But if it goes to increase, the temperature goes to increase, it will be earlier that we will have this high temperatures. Another food that is very common in Mediterranean is the fish. We already have done many, how can I say, so many things that are really bad for our fishes and all our marine life on fauna and flora. So between 1950 and 2011, so only in 50 years, we have lost 41% of top marine predators and 34% of fish species, only in 50 years. In 33 years, from 1994 and 2017, Mediterranean total fishery landings declined by 28%. That means that when this is the quantity of fish that have been fished in the sea, in the Mediterranean Sea. So in 33 years, we have fished 28% less quantity of fish. So what will happen with the increase in temperature? 1 degree increase in temperature made the body size of a fish decrease by 20 to 30%. This is only for 1 degree. So let's imagine for 5 degrees. This is because, in fact, if you rise temperature in the sea, there is a lower oxygen concentration in water, so the fish cannot breathe, and it adapt and make his body smaller. So all these problems around fishing are caused by warming, of course, and acidification, but also the overfishing and bad fishing habits, pollution, and invasive species that come from other seas that like very much Mediterranean because it's warm and it's calm, and they don't have the predators that they have in their original habitat. So what is going to happen around 2050? I remember that I want to remember you that is in 30 years. So a local extension of up to 50% of exploited fish and marine invertebrate. So 50% of this marine fauna that we use, that we exploit, that we eat, will be extinct in 30 years. So climate change, environmental change will touch our essentials. So the water we drink and irrigate with, surface waters will evaporate, underground water will be salinized, and both of them are already very much polluted. We will not have enough food because the yields are going to lower, and the coastal area are going to be submerged. It's not very good news, but I hope you enjoyed this presentation and learned something new. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to say that if you want more details, you can find it on the MEDEC website, where you will find also the report of 634 pages with many, many details about this climate and environmental change. We will also have some summary for people that don't want to read all these pages. And I invite you to go and to learn more about the subject. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Samia. I mean, in a normal situation, we would applaud you, but it's kind of, it's different. It's difficult to read. But thank you for your message. And yes, it's important that you commented the report that, I mean, you can find it on the MEDEC website, and also the summary for policymakers in English, French, Arab, Spanish, Catalan, and I think that we will have the Greek and Italian version very soon. So they all invited to read at least the summary for policymakers, and not only, I mean, you're invited to read it, but also to act and to react to this report. Now, I would like to give the floor to Arnaud Gras, who will comment on what Samia has explained. So Arnaud knows very well the MEDEC report. I mean, the MEDEC report is there because of other people, Arnaud. So Arnaud, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup. Bonsoir Arnaud. Good evening. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Merci beaucoup, chers partenaires, chers collègues.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you, Professor Celia, for your presentation. The UFM has been working thanks to Arnaud and our partners, the United Nations Programme for the Natural Environment, as we have just been reminded. For the UFM, the best policy to be followed by political decision makers is the one that has a crucial perspective for the region to respond to challenges that are clearly exposed in this report. And if I have to talk about a parallel with the global world, I would ask the following. The works developed about climate and biodiversity are a crucial frame of reference. It is already a reality with regards to the MEG works in the Mediterranean. It is the scientific reference in terms of climate change and in terms of biodiversity and the natural environment. We won't be able to say anymore that we didn't know. Science has spoken up. So now we have to listen to it, we have to understand it, and we also need to contribute to disseminate its knowledge. Thank you, Arnaud, and thank you, IEMED, for this report. The main challenge we face nowadays is to ensure that this scientific knowledge is well understood and well disseminated in the different amongst the people who have decision-making power in order to take action as soon as possible and with the maximum economic efficiency. This is important so that the scientific recommendation is well used in decision-making processes with real elements to build up this new policy in terms of resilience and adaptation. We have started this work with programs for the use of climate services for the different economic sectors. Start with the World Forecasting, Weather Forecasting Service and EUPOS. We have to know about the Mediterranean as has been recognized for other regions and other countries, like the small island states. Time is pressing, and the means are not yet up to standard. We need to look for funds and resources to invest in infrastructures, and we need to train, inform, and invest in research education. We need to use fully the Paris Agreement to act. In this Paris Agreement has to actually be implemented. And this cooperation framework offers excellent instrument for countries on the southern shore. In fact, we believe that now we are starting to see all the potential benefits of this agreement. And the next decade will actually see how these tools can be useful. The contributions made at a national level by the CNN, NDC, this year before COP26 will be a significant landmark. As you know, Lebanon has a crisis. It's undergoing a crisis, and it is a country that is very much aware of the dangers and risks in the Mediterranean, and they will make it compatible. The CDNs are approaching numerous goals, and not only on the climate front. And the review of the CDMs will be an opportunity, a great opportunity. And in fact, they will become increasingly structured with multiple co-benefits for all of the ODSs, for all of the SDGs, to reinforce the capacity of southern countries to assure technology transfers and to reinforce their capacities and to assure the respect of the financial commitments of northern countries with regard, which will be followed up very closely during the whole period. And we have to remember that as soon as possible, we have to go beyond all of it, even if there are different approaches between the different countries, between 0 and more. The international community recognizes that we need to maintain all of this in a hypersensitive region like the Mediterranean. We will have to do everything at hand not to go beyond 1.5 degrees. And we want to attain this goal, we will have to be very strict. The Mediterranean has to assume a global perspective. The world will need for that to actually will be looking at this region. This year, we have been able to convey all of these messages thanks to significant UPM regional meetings with the IUCM summit in Marseille and the 26th agreement in Strasbourg. We will make a contribution as we have been able to do at the UPM, because we created a new committee for the region. We have opened the discussion about the links between political science and society, thanks to its great media impact. We have been quoted more than 2,000 times in all languages in the region. Let me give you some examples of good administration actions. Let me mention MEDEC, not only to talk about the Marwan report, but because of the cooperation spirit that will prevail in the future. Inside the scientific committee, because it's a very solid, robust network that has been developed because of its voluntary spirit and because of all of the impact that has come from the external world through policies and the people, the technical officers, the media and civil society. And I have to point out that following the proposal made by the UFM, the MEDEC has been actually taken to the Council of Europe and at the United Nations. Mr. Kofi Annan and Madame Simone Veil and Queen Fada Abdullah have given its support to it. And this year we will have a chance to know more about it. It is another indirect result of the MEDEC report is that the sector chosen for the next program of the EU is related to the climate, renewables, and health. This gives us perspectives after many years of research, innovation, and investment. But we also have other initiatives based on the UPM, for example, the funding, especially to respond to all of it. The first work has shown that adaptation projects are very poorly funded in the region. And this poor funding is especially true in some countries in the region. And locally, the territories are the poor relations and they have problems to access funding. With regards to these different challenges, UPM has developed multiple approaches to try to respond to it. And thanks to the work of the labelization of UPM, a project funded by the European Union, and through different cooperation agreements. And amongst these agreements, I'd like to point out the cooperation agreement with Air20, the Air20 network, Foundation for Action Against Climate Change, has given already fruit with its partners, the International Network for the Conservation of Nature, the fund. PAVA has developed a global action plan that has been approved by and thanks to the support of the UPM by 7 countries in the region. And we will prepare a second file that will be complementary to the first one. Other initiatives will also be developed throughout the decade, and I hope that we'll have a good chance to mention them. Thank you for your attention.
Merci Arnaud. Je voudrais aussi souligner qu'il y a
I have to say, Arnaud,
a déjà commencé 3 nouveaux rapports.
that this report
Les risques côtiers, le deuxième
is
sur
very important.
changement climatique, alimentation, services écosystémiques,
Because to systemic action
migration et les conflits sociaux et politiques. Je crois que c'est ça, Arnaud.
and political action.
La première phase, ça veut dire qu'on est en train de faire la sélection des auteurs.
And
Oui, tout à fait.
that's what you were referring to, right? Yes, indeed. We have renewed our preparation agreement with the Regional Action Center, the PAF, and the financial support for this technical support, and all of these works will start very soon. I have to say that EFEC is an independent body. But we have the Principality of Monaco.
C'est une structure complexe, mais très intéressante. Alors, bon, on a déjà quelques questions que je vais poser. Alors, we have a first comment from Josep Canals.
We have a comment from Josep Canals.
And he says, as a comment, he says, well, we need to raise awareness among the general public with specific examples of effects like the ones showed by Professor Say. Municipalities have a lot to do in this regard. And this comment links to it links to our first question specific to Senia. Selon vous, Senia, les populations au sud de la Méditerranée sont-elles suffisamment conscientes des conséquences du changement climatique? Comment les
Are
perçoivent-elles?
communities on the southern shore aware enough about climate change? And which are the priorities in certain countries like Turkey? Have you been able to listen to me well?
Oui, il n'y a aucun problème parce qu'on a la traduction.
May I speak in French? Yes, please. Yes, in fact,
Bon, je ne peux donner que mon avis, hein.
I can only give my own opinion. I do not believe that the populations on the southern shore are aware about the seriousness of the situation.
Changement climatique du fait des vagues de chaleur.
They are aware about heat waves and waves. But beyond that, I do not believe they are aware about the general climate change emergency. Are certain local actions that are undertaken in some countries, but we do not hear anybody talking about them, and they are quite minor, to be honest. At any rate, that's my own personal opinion.
On a une autre question, mais je vais la poser en anglais. Et je crois que c'est
We have another question.
Have you measured the
That's for both of you.
economic and social costs of climate change in the Mediterranean? If ongoing trends are not reversed, are there studies on this? So c'est pour les deux, it's for you both, Semyon or Arnaud.
I can just ask partially, and then Arnaud can answer also if he has an answer. I think it's something very difficult to measure because it's as you see, there are hundreds, thousands of parameters. How can you measure the influence on water evaporation, for example, on food, and then extrapolate it to economic, impact on people? Of course you can, but it's very complicated. And I don't think it has been done because in the MEDEC report, it was very difficult to have this kind of information. And I don't think that it has already been done only for some point, what is the influence of this phenomena on economy and social and etc.
Okay. Arnaud?
Oui, alors je pense qu'on peut cependant quand même faire référence à certaines études qui sont au niveau global.
This question refers to certain studies carried out globally, not only for our Mediterranean region.
Et qui, en termes de conclusion, je dirais directement
As a conclusion, I would say that
montre que l'inaction climatique coûte beaucoup plus cher que
of action is much more expensive, favorable investment, the favorable investment for the climate. And the fact we invest in mitigation policies, in climate mitigation policies, is above the costs of non-action, which would be
et quelques exemples encore récents dans la région.
Some very recent examples in the region. France is facing a new climate phenomenon.
Trop précoces.
You know, crops that come too early. And agriculturalists were not insured for that, and they lost their crop. And well, the effects could be infinite. With regards to the territorial communities, you have given the example of Climalade, but I'd like to say that this is a project that moves 100 countries in 100 cities in 8 countries in the region.
Suffisamment de communication.
There isn't enough communication.
Donc ce type d'exercice comme celui d'aujourd'hui, merci.
Still, this type of exercise allows us to collect that information. But of course, there is a lot of awareness raising, capacity building, training, and education to be carried out throughout.
Oui, ça c'est clair.
Yes, that's clear. I believe that we need to explain very, very well to the population, you know, the challenges posed by climate change. Because we always talk about the economic and financial effects, but there is also an adaptation side to all of it, so that society is actually able to manage the social and psychological impacts of climate change, because those will also be a reality as well. Now, we have mentioned the term adaptation, and I have a question that comes from the audience about adaptation. And it is a question for both of you in English.
Adequate to achieve climate-related SDGs by 2030? What concrete mitigation and adaptation policy should be established as priorities in the following years? It's a big question. Do you? I mean, I don't know if you want that I repeat it, or did you take it? Because I think I have some problems with my microphone. I can repeat again.
I don't know. Arnaud, it's okay for you?
Oui, je peut-être continuer à décliner ce que je précisais tout à l'heure dans mon discours. C'est notamment ce qui est en train d'être préparé dans le cadre des contributions déterminées au niveau national.
The point is to be actually is to develop the agreement of the Paris Agreement. All of the policies for energy efficiency and the development of renewable sources of energy are favorable for the struggle against climate change. And we have the example of France, where there is a new ambitious document within the framework for the preparation of COVID-26. And we have perspectives that are quite ambitious with regards to all of this. Now, with regards to adaptation, doubtlessly, it is less strong than adaptation. From a strategic point of view, we can see what the EU has done in terms of adaptation. And it affects part of the Mediterranean, of course. We have, in order to have as big an action as possible in our basin, in consulting scientific bodies that will be adhering to the adaptation strategy, MEDEC is part of this, so that the EU work can also benefit southern countries. and vice versa, so that BEDEC can also benefit from the experience of Southern Shore countries in terms of the management of water and the impact of heat waves, etc.
D'accord. Samia, est-ce que tu veux
Excellent.
ajouter quelque chose?
Thank you. Would you like to add anything, Samia?
Non, pas vraiment. Moi, la
No, not
politique,
really.
je suis plutôt scientifique.
I do not have anything to say about politics or policies. I am a scientist. Well, but you need, I mean, you know, scientists need to speak up in order to inform politicians, in order to inform the policy.
Oui, mais à mon avis, déjà,
Well,
je pense que ça dépend beaucoup
but
des
I
pays.
believe it depends very much on the country.
Ça dépend beaucoup des
It
pays.
depends on which
Et ce qui est
country
très
we are
important,
referring
en fait,
to.
ici,
What's very
et
important,
ça,
in
c'est vraiment
fact,
en tant que scientifique que
and
je
this I'm saying it as a
absolument,
scientist,
justement,
we
s'adapter.
need to
Parce
adapt.
que nous,
Because
aujourd'hui,
nowadays,
croient
human beings
qu'il a
believe
réussi à dominer la
that
nature, qu'il a réussi
we
à
have
dominer
dominated
ce
nature.
qui est autour de lui, alors que c'est pas
We
le
have
cas.
dominated our environment, and
Nous
that's
sommes
not the
faits de
case at
bactéries,
all.
nous sommes faits de
We
virus,
are
nous
made
sommes
up
faits
of
de micro-organismes.
bacteria, virus, and
Et
microorganisms,
nous devons nous adapter
and we
à ça.
need to adapt to that.
Et c'est pareil pour le changement
And
climatique.
it's the same is applicable to climate
Maintenant,
change.
il faut
We have made
essayer de les corriger,
many mistakes, and now we have to
non
try and
pas en y
correct them,
allant de force,
not
mais
by
avec une approche
adding
multiple.
force,
Ça, c'est
but with a
très important.
multiple
Parce qu'on va pas
approach. And
trouver
that's so
une
important because we
solution
will not
qui
find a
fait tout.
single
On
solution
a fait des milliers de
that
choses.
solves everything. We have done
Pollution,
thousands of
oui,
things,
mais on peut
thousands
pas
of
résoudre ça
polluting
avec une
actions,
seule action
and we
scientifique.
cannot revert all of that with
D'abord, il
one
faut une
single action.
coopération
First of all, we need
entre le nord
cooperation
et le sud. Ça,
between
c'est
the
absolument
north and the south.
indispensable.
That's
Non pas juste pour un
absolutely
transfert de technologie,
crucial,
ce genre
not
de choses,
only
mais
in
vraiment
terms of
des accords
technology transfer, which is one thing, but
politiques.
with real
C'est vraiment
political
un
agreement.
problème politique parce que
It
une
is a
fois que la
political
décision
problem because
politique
once
est
the
prise,
political decision
à
has
mon
been
avis, on
made,
va pouvoir
in
débloquer
my
beaucoup de
opinion,
choses.
we
Parce
will
qu'en
be
fait,
able
un
to
problème
unblock many
aussi
things
bien au
because
niveau
it
des
is a problem
sociétés, comme vous
both
avez dit,
in
donc il faut
terms of
informer les
societies,
gens
as you have said,
pour
we
qu'ils se
need
rendent
to
compte
inform people
de
so
ce
that
qui
they
se passe
realize
et
what's going
qu'ils
on,
puissent agir et
so that they can
accepter
actually act and
les modifications,
accept
les changements,
the
etc.
changes,
Et puis au niveau
etc.
politique, il
And at a
faudrait
political level,
volonté
on the political
pour que les
front,
décisions
we need
exactes soient
political
prises.
will so
Parce que
that
si on n'a pas le
actions
choix,
are really
on va
undertaken.
le faire.
Because if
C'est
we
ça
have
que je veux
no
dire.
choice,
Et je
we will do
répète,
it.
ce sont des
And
actions
let
de
me repeat,
coopération,
these
pas de
are
compétition.
cooperation actions and multiple actions that we need.
Effectivement, et je crois que c'est une mission
Well,
politique, mais c'est aussi
it
une
is
question sociale, c'est-à-dire
a political issue, but it's also a social issue, the social question.
Alors, on a une question.
We have another question here about
Nous vivons dans l'ère COVID-19. Alors,
we're talking now about, we come to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have, of course, a question about COVID-19 related to climate change. And the question is for both of you in English.
COVID-19 pandemic affected climate and environmental change in the Mediterranean region, and has the COVID-19 hindered efforts towards the implementation of SDG 13 related to climate action? What do you think about this?
I didn't hear the.
Yeah, so
the
the second is, and has the COVID-19 hindered efforts towards the implementation of SDG 13, which is a climate action related to climate action?
So in fact, I just touched the problem in the it is a scientific part, not the political part. So in fact, there was it was not long enough, as I told in my speech, that the lockdown cannot show really some impact on pollution. Because also when the lockdown ended, we have a rebound effect. So there was more pollution than before, just for a period of time. But in the few months when there were lockdowns in the whole world, in fact, because there were studies that were done on 100 and a few countries, and we can see that there was a decrease in NO2 and NOx, so it's one kind of pollutant of the air, NO2 is known that with the problem of respiration and lungs problems. But we have also an increase in other pollutants like ozone. So we cannot conclude about this. On waters, the effect was very clear. We have cleaner waters and the cleaner coastal sediments and cleaner coastal waters. We have done tests with chlorophyll A for people that know what is it. So it's an indication of pollution. So the pollution has decreased in seawater, in underground water, and in rivers. I think it's just because the industrial pollution has decreased. So of course, if the factories are closed, so they cannot pollute. I think that's it's only this point. And also I thought that there was a decrease in noise. Also, I think because there is no traffic, there is no industry, so of course the noise will decrease. As for the CDG, I think I will leave the words to Mr. Gray.
Parfait. Arnaud?
Oui.
Perfect. Arnaud, yes, indeed. We have all observed a number of consequences and effects, real positive effects on the natural environment. But basically, infrastructures have not changed. So the economic fundamentals as regards the consequences of economic activity on climate change have not really changed. On the other hand, the enormous impact that COVID-19 had in terms of awareness raising about the link between the natural environment and human beings could have some dramatic consequences. And this awareness raising has been very significant. There are lessons to be learned to understand better how this impact could be used, between inverted commas, to better rebuild our economies and to use these relaunching plans and to make them as green as possible. Because a large part of the population is well aware that to continue exploiting natural resources, which has been the case up to now, is not sustainable. And that's why pandemics like COVID-19 have had catastrophic consequences. I believe that the lesson we have learned is awareness raising. And we need to build up relaunching plans that are as green as possible in order not to fall back into the mistakes that we fell into after the 2008 crisis, because we had an enormous increase of greenhouse effects after the 2008 crisis. The International Energy Agency's report was quite alarming last week. But with what was announced yesterday by the very Energy International Agency about its advice with regards to stop using fossil fuels, is a real turning point in the world of energy. We have to remember that the IEU, which is the arm of the World Trade Organization, talked about energy security issues based on oil reserves. Well, there is a paradigm change here, an enormous paradigm change, because the announcement made yesterday showed that new roads are possible in order to achieve zero net carbon emissions by 2050.
Yeah.
Right, if you allow me, I'd like to also make a comment. Indeed, I also wanted to talk about the awareness raising as regards our viral environment. And this is very important because this is something that many ecologists say for a long time, and I'm an ecologist in addition to being a scientist. We say that when we destroy a natural environment, viruses and different illnesses that beforehand attacked wild animals can actually start attacking pets and domestic animals. And this is what has happened recently in many countries. And I'm referring to what happened some years before. And there have been different countries in which certain serious illness epidemics have occurred due to the pets. And they had actually stemmed from wild animals that had lost their natural habitats. And instead of transmitting these illnesses to other wild animals, they transmitted them to domestic pets, and the domestic pets passed them on to human beings. Yes, indeed. I think that COVID-19 has allowed us to become very much aware about these dangers, at least in Europe. This will be accelerated soon in order to manage the consequences of COVID. To give rise to this new Green Deal that had been defined before the pandemic. But this is so important to be able to speed up things, especially a Mediterranean Green Deal. In fact, Arnaud has mentioned the Energy International Alliances report, and I'd like to recommend that report to everybody, especially the conclusions they reach. And when the International Energy Agency sent the message that we should stop using fossil fuels, I believe that it is truly a paradigm change. We need to adapt and follow the message. There is a question about energy here. And this will be the last question, as we need to finish in 7 minutes' time, I believe, and we will be very punctual. So the question in English is, it is for Arnaud, but Semia could also answer it. And it says the following.
Plan to encourage renewable energy projects in the non-EU member Mediterranean countries. So I repeat, is there an action plan to encourage renewable energy projects in the non-EU member Mediterranean countries? I think it's not. Arnaud, do you know if there are some action plans?
Alors, il y a dans
l'acte fondateur in the founding act of the Union for the Mediterranean, there is an appendix in this founding document, a program called Solar Mediterranean Plan, which tries to develop a maximum amount of renewable energy throughout Mediterranean countries. That plan has not come to reality yet. It has not been carried out. But the works promoted at the beginning of 2010 have allowed us to launch different cooperation platforms in the field of energy within the UFM, specifically in the field of energy efficiency and renewables, and the electric interconnection. I mentioned gas as well, but with a new perspective that imply new sources of energy.
Désormais, pour ce qui concerne les réseaux de gaz,
with regards to the gas networks, we have to look beyond. Now, this plan that had been imagined in a way a bit too really top-down, to use the typical English expression, has generated the creation of this platform.
Elles l'ont fait dans le cadre d'une déclaration ministérielle
And and after the declaration of the UFM in 2014, it will be carried out and approved on the 10th of June in Portugal during the ministerial summit, and they will continue with their works in this field. So it is not a plan or a master plan, so to speak. It's not a roadmap, but many initiatives and projects have stemmed in a more bottom-up fashion. We have projects that come from the bottom and that crop up where the need is the greatest. And of course, renewable energy sources are one of the main vectors for these operations and for the projects that are to come. Semia. The problem of energy is not my specialty, but I have actually studied it a little bit. But I didn't understand why southern countries are not more involved.
Qui nous a offert dès le début un très bon exemple d'utilisation d'énergie solaire, alors que ce n'est pas quand même.
The use of solar energy in Tunisia, for example, is not great, although it's one of the sunniest countries in the world. There are many projects that have been brought forward. I believe that we need to encourage people through financial motivators, tax reductions. The solar panels are very expensive. So in my opinion, we need fiscal and financial motivators. I believe that we need to encourage people to use that. That's my opinion after what I've seen. Well, it implies an investment at all levels, all the way to the private person. Yes, both a private person's investment and also societal or company investment. Well, allow me to conclude about this point. Say that we should actually have a fourth report devoted to mitigation and energy in order to go back to Ruan's energy chapter, which unfortunately is the one that will age faster due to the acceleration of the energy transition that has just been announced and that has been confirmed with what the International Energy Agency announced yesterday. Fully agree. In fact, it is the chapter that will age the fastest, as you have said. But
more about energy transition in the Mediterranean, please take note that the second dialogue in this cycle will focus on energy. So I think that Josep Will and Jaume allow me to make this remark, because the next dialogue that will take place on the 16th June, please take note of this date, 16 June 2021, will focus on accelerating the energy transition in the southern and eastern Mediterranean. Key factors and challenges. I think that you made some very interesting points, and I hope that that the organizers will take note of this of your points. But it is a crucial topic, not only in the southern and eastern Mediterranean countries, but also in the European shore, in the northern shore. You know that for instance, here in Catalonia, but in all we are accelerating, or we should accelerate this transition, and it's a crucial topic just now. So it's time for closing the session. If Jaume and Josep agree with this idea, in order to be sharp. Thank you very much. I mean that this was an initial debate, initial session to set the scene. It's obvious, and we agree, we already know, but we are more convinced than ever that climate change is one of the key challenges for ecosystems, I mean, for the environment, but also for economies and for societies. It's important. But one of the main points that the Mark 1, the MEDEC report highlights is that it's not only, I mean, we are experiencing the climate change, but also the environmental change, which is, they're linked, but they are not, I mean, not everything that happens in the Mediterranean should be related to climate change. I mean, the way we build the cities, or we expand the cities, the way we behave in terms of consumers, the impact of activities, of economic activities on the environment. I mean, they provide a combination of factors, drivers affecting the climate and the environment in the Mediterranean. I think that we should be proud of the Mediterranean people. I think that we learned how to adapt to difficult climate conditions and environmental conditions historically. I mean, the Mediterranean people, Mediterranean societies, Mediterranean economies have been adapting to severe or to difficult conditions historically, and we should be proud of it because we knew about climate change just before other regions started talking about climate change, you know. And the point is that, but now the point is that we will be severely affected by climate change. Climate change is there with this tremendous economic, environmental, and social cost, and there is no time to wait for action. You know, Jaume know me, Josep know me, and Arnaud aussi, and they know that when I start speaking, I can speak for hours without saying almost anything. So the shorter, the better. So thank you very much. Thank you for Professor Semi Sharif and Agnographs for your contributions. I hope that they were, I'm sure they were interesting for the audience. And Josep and Jaume, thank you for inviting the three of us. I'm sure that we will follow the second dialogue also in order to learn and to contribute in terms on the energy transition. So thank you, merci beaucoup, bonne soirée, good evening, bon vespre, buenas noches.
Merci beaucoup. Bonne soirée.
Au revoir.
Au
Merci.
revoir.